Malta and Gozo are islands which lie between Sicily and the continent of Africa. The capital, Valletta, is the political, business and cultural centre of the Republic of Malta. The Crusaders and English colonial rule have left their marks, but the Arabian influence was also very strong. Malta's architectural heritage is enormous. Every building in Valletta is listed as a historical monument. Only recently did the inhabitants of Malta vote to join the European community. The geographical situation of the islands has always meant a very close relationship to seafaring for the islanders. The sea provided protection, but was also a challenge at the same time. The harbours had to be defended. The cliffs on the coasts were not easy for conquerors to occupy. It was tedious work to farm and harvest the barren soil over the past millenniums. The huge, at least 5,000-year-old temple facilities are witnesses of a prehistoric religion. This temple, partly built from gigantic stone blocks, has round rooms and most probably stone vaults. That the temples were places of worship is not to be questioned. Altars and other details are proof enough. But what influence did the religious concepts of the megalithic builders have on their architecture? Maybe the temples are aligned to a certain point of the compass. And if so, what meaning could it have had? The modern-day Maltese are religious people. Accordingly, a large number of churches can be found there. Many of their mighty domes can be seen from afar. Catholicism has developed in its own special way. The islanders made many sacrifices in order to erect some monumental buildings. The worshipping of Madonna has always been very important. More than half of the churches have been dedicated to the Mother of God. It is shortly before Christmas in Valletta. People are preparing for the festivities. Christmas decorations and street entertainment are part of the annual ritual. In the dark winter months, brightness and light play a big part. These are days before the winter solstice, the shortest days of the year. This is when all cultures on earth celebrate the rebirth of light, a traditionally ancient festivity. But now let us turn to the Maltese temples in more detail. Their southeast alignment could suggest a connection with the Christmas festivities. It is 6:30 in the morning and the temple of Hajar-im still lies in darkness. It is a few days before the winter solstice. Professor Frank Ventura from Malta and the author of the film are waiting for the first sun rays to shine through the main entrance of the temple. It seems possible that an alignment of the temple towards the sunrise of the winter solstice is more than likely. The sun's rays fall through the entrance to shine briefly onto the left side altar. It was here where during excavations a stone decorated with spirals was found. At exactly 8 o'clock, the sun shines along the main axis. In Malta, a whole range of Copper Age temples can be found, most of which are aligned, as is Hajar-im, towards the southeast. The Temple of Manaydra is a very interesting example of this alignment. It is situated in a beautiful landscape not far from Hajar-im. The temple was built using carefully formed stones. Passages connect the single rooms. Altars once again prove the cultic character of the building. Artificial light from a few lamps give the temple a pale hue shortly before dawn. The lower temple is well known for its east alignment. The laying of a special stone towards sunrise on winter solstice will be measured exactly and documented again. Even when a part of the building is not in its original condition, the ground plan, essential for measurements, is, in most cases, complete and intact. Today the sun should rise at 5 minutes past 7. The instant in time when the first sun's rays fall through the entrance. We can see a bright stripe of sunlight on the right altar stone, which disappears shortly afterwards, just as it did when the temple was being built. Professor Ventura investigated this temple in detail many years ago.
This Maltas Temple is a very special temple because its axis shows exactly, is in the direction of sunrise at the equinox on March 21st and September 22nd. And then also on the solstices, at the solstices, December 21st, the sun comes in diagonally and it hits a special stone on one side of the temple. And also at the summer solstice, it comes in diagonally, and it hits another stone there. So some people call it a calendar because it can show the beginning of the seasons. So this is what is very special about this temple. The other signs are that at the winter solstice, on the horizon of this temple, there is a hole where there could have been a post there, and this would have marked where the sun rises on the horizon from this temple.
The small temple of Manidra has a very special feature. According to Professor Ventura, rows of holes can be found which could show connections to the rising and setting of the constellation of the Pleiades.
Well, this stone is also special because it has a number of markings on it. This cross is new, I mean it is modern, but then there are these holes here, which are very strange, and also a series of holes here, which also are very strange. And especially this arrangement with a number of holes there, it reminds me of one of the patterns that one sees on the nebula disk. And they have been interpreted on the nebula disk as the Pleiades. Could these be the Pleiades also, or these the stars? We don't know. I mean, this is a stone which needs more study, I think.
Many prehistoric buildings or monuments have been aligned to celestial bodies, especially the sun. Stonehenge, for example, is aligned to the sunrise of the summer solstice, or New Grange in Ireland to the winter solstice. How exactly our ancestors observed the stars has been proven by the recently discovered bronze plate of Nibra. One can see not only the sun, moon and constellation of the Pleiades, but also the areas where the sun rises and sets on the horizon. The golden band on the edge shows the exact angle of 82 degrees, the valid measurement of the finding site. In Malta we find a correspondingly different latitude, a less extreme starting point. The view from the left altar through the entrance is in most temples directed exactly towards the sunrise of winter solstice. This can be seen here in the middle temple of Manidra. The sun falls through the entrance onto the left altar. The illustration of a temple on the side altar stone is surprisingly lit up. One can well imagine that cultic objects were placed on this altar. The bright front lights up in the morning sun. The sun sets at an angle of 116 degrees as seen from the north. This measurement is valid for all of Malta, lying at 35 degrees latitude. In the temple of Tahajrat, well known for its mighty entrance door, the sun also shines on the left inside altar at winter solstice. Anthony Bonanno, Professor of Archaeology at the University of Malta, confirms the preference of the temple builders for southeast alignment. However,
to start with, one is surprised when one looks at the archaeological repertoire of the temple period in Malta that there is little, if any, representation regarding the celestial bodies. We don't have representations of the sun or other celestial bodies, except for one relief, one stone which has what looks like separation segments with stars and the moon. When you restrict it to one particular celestial body like the sun, I should think that it becomes a bit more credible. If there is an alignment to the sun, then it opens a new chapter, a new page to the Maltese, to the reconstruction of the religious beliefs of our temple builders.
up to now, researchers' knowledge of the temple builders' religion were that of fertility and the cult of the dead. Large, heavy statues of women were found in the temples. They were seen as goddesses of fertility, but do they have anything to do with the alignment of the temple? The statue heads found during the excavations belong to the figures. Most of them are looking towards heaven. There is a rather noticeable harmony and form between the female figures and the temples. We can recognize figures in the ground plans of the temple. Shortly after sunrise, the sun falls into their laps and through into the main altar deep inside the temple. It symbolizes the holy wedding, the union of heaven and earth. A very special figure is that of the sleeping lady. Could it be that she is waiting to be awakened by the sun? She was found in Hypogeum, an underground temple. Situated near Valletta, it was discovered by builders in the 19th century. The cave, like the temple, a symbol of Mother Earth. Small rooms for burial and devotion were found there. The construction of the walls and ceilings lead to the assumption that the temple above the ground must have been similarly constructed. Altars, oracle halls, and sacrifice pits were used for cultic acts. The spirals on the ceiling were painted with red ochre, the color of life. An old Maltese reported that earlier, when the entrance was open, the sunset at winter solstice would shine into the main temple room. The temple of Tarshin is one exception to the alignment practice. It is not aligned to the sunrise, but to the sunset of winter solstice. Lying in a wonderful garden midst a built-up area near Valletta, it was excavated by Zammit, a Maltese archaeologist, 100 years ago, as was the temple of Hypogeum. The temple is not very clearly arranged, with its different axes and rooms, and, unfortunately, not very well restored. Decorative figures, spirals and sun plates give us a notion as to the cultic concepts at that time. The main axis of the temple points to the southwest. Shortly before the sun sets, it shines here into the corridor. A little later, on the sacrifice altar. And the last rays light up the right altar. To be able to experience another spectacular temple, we have to journey past the small island of Comino to Malta's neighbouring island, Gozo. On arriving in the harbour of Gozo, we can see the first churches competing for our attention. Gozo is smaller than Malta, and because of the island's raised position, the sea can be seen everywhere. Gozo is known as the Green Island. Churches, small villages and terraced fields influence the landscape. Agriculture, stock breeding, fishing and seafaring have been the economic foundation of the people living here from the very beginning. Nowadays, tourism also plays a part. Salt winning had to be an important branch of industry, even in early times. Shurnas, small stone huts, were probably the living quarters for the inhabitants on the island. The technique of building dome constructions from unhewn natural stone has been known and practiced in the whole Mediterranean area since the Neolithic period. Even today, houses are built using massive stone, but caves are also used for livestock and as storage cellars. Caves as living quarters are known from prehistoric times. A cave in Gozo is closely connected to a Greek legend, according to the inhabitants. An old man tells the story of the Calypso cave.
The story told legend about 2,000 years ago.
Calypso, a nymph, is holding the stranded Odysseus captive in a cave. He suffered 7 long years of imprisonment before being spoken free by Zeus.
But the cave, it is all nature.
The legend describes a female goddess welcoming a male half-god in a cave, a figurative picture for the idea used for building the Maltese Temple. 2 important prehistoric buildings have survived in Gozo. They are the Chara Circle and Chantia. Both have the characteristics of caves or grottos. The Chara Circle is a burial ground and a subterranean temple, similar to the Hypogeum in Malta. The original stones, which still lay above the ground in the 19th century, have been used for buildings in the near vicinity. It is possible that a temple stood above the cave. Within the stone circle of Chara, a small sculpture of 2 women sitting next to each other was found. One is holding a small figure on her lap. She symbolizes the birth of mankind. The other symbolizes death. Primevally, the picture is of a mother with child. A 3,300-year-old Anatolian figure shows a similar symbol. An alignment to the winter solstice can be proven by referring to ancient drawings. At Chantia, two adjacently built temples give the viewer the impression of a joint form. Enormous stones were moved and still bear homage to their constructor's willingness to create. One of the long-serving watchmen in the temple of Chantia, Joseph Attard, he explains the method of building used.
About the construction, the inner part, as you note, it's built by round blocks of stones. We say it by cyclopean construction. Outside, because it was built in later period, it's built by megalithic construction, which means big standing stone. That's also note the different time, the different period when the temples were built. There is the temples were built. It was roofed. We have 5 apses, and the corridor was left open, so the light will goes from there. And also, when they burn the sacrifice, the smokes goes out from the space that they left open from the corridor.
The main axis of the temple has also impressed this artist.
There is a legend that says that our forefather says that these temples were built by a woman who carries his baby after her back, and on her head she carry one of these stones, of these slabs, while on the way he eaten the beams. That's a legend.
To get stronger.
Yeah, and it's also we have a dolmen with they call it tasansuna. Sansuna means a giant lady.
This huge stone was surely meant to be used as a part of the temple. Unfortunately, it only got this far. On the day of the winter solstice, the 21st of December 2002, one can see clouds on the horizon opposite Chantia. The sky first brightens up after the sun has risen. 5,000 years ago, the sun rose above the old windmill hills of Nadur. It must have looked very much the same as now. The temple of Chantia is also aligned on a southeast axis. After rising, the sun falls through the entrance at an angle of 116 degrees onto the left altar, and shortly afterwards lights up the vertical stone. The most decisive effect of the sun is, however, approximately 1 hour after dawn, when the strongest beams of sunlight flood into the main axis. From above, it really seems like a path of light. It is exactly the same in the other part of the temple. It is presumed that on the morning of the winter solstice, the sun shone through a skylight onto the main altar at the end of the passage, where a statue was probably standing. A replica of Shurna also has a similar skylight above the door, as commonly found in such artial buildings. In this way, sun and air can enter the building even when the door is closed. Similar constructions can also be found in the New Grange Temple in Ireland, which was built at around the same time. Again, the sun's rays enter through the skylight, flood the long passage and finally shine onto the altar at the end of the passage. A 3,000-year-old Egyptian picture makes the theory behind the religious conception of alignment clear. After returning from the underworld, the sun god shines on the goddess of the earth. She shines brightly in the sunbeams that reach her through the flowering lilies, another symbol for fertility. Without the sun, no form of life could exist. This knowledge was the basis for sun worshipping. Through holes in stones, the sun penetrates deep into the earth. A snake statue was found in Jantia. The snake is the symbol of the powers of the underworld. Renewing its skin is a sign of rebirth. For the sun, too, both classical myths of ancient times. Spiral forms found in many temples represent the coming back to life. Multiplications of the ornaments probably imply an eternal returning to life. We shouldn't finish descriptions of the Maltese temples at the time of winter solstice without taking a brief look at the modern way of celebrating the rebirth of light and the festivities that take place nowadays. The birth of Christ is celebrated around the time of the winter solstice. An angel, the symbol for the connection between heaven and earth, hangs above the church portal. An angel in exactly the same position where many churches have skylights. Of course, the children take an active part in the festive preparations. Although we know very little about the religious plays at the time of the temple builders, we are sure that at the time of the winter solstice, the rebirth of light must have played a very important part in the temple ceremonies. Jesus, the Son of God, brings light and salvation to earth. The cosmos is reborn. The turning of the year is completed, as once in the Neolithic temples and as nowadays in the Christian churches. Small and large cribs are found all over Malta and Gozo, even in the houses. This example here is made of coral limestone, built like a grotto, into which a mysterious light shines. The annual Christmas concert takes place in the church at Chara. The place may change, but the festive atmosphere is always there. As in the temples, an altar at the end of the main axis is also to be found in the churches. Decorated with an impressive sun corona, the child of God in the center. How close we are today to the temple builders' religious conceptions can be seen here. A ceiling fresco depicts the Immaculate Conception through a ray of sun. Touched by the sun, Mary glows in a bright, radiant light.